Doubts have been raised that the HS2 rail link will terminate in central London as originally planned. The Sun newspaper is suggesting the high-speed rail line may end in the suburbs of West London because of spiralling costs. Harry Cole, who's the political editor at The Sun, he broke the story.
While it's running at 10% for everyday goods in the shops, in the construction industry, in some parts of the construction industry, it's running much, much higher than that. Now, my understanding is over the last few months, over the last year, lots of subcontracts that HS2 have taken out with various firms providing concrete, steel, labour, have all come back and said, look, we cannot afford to honour our contracts based on these prices. Treasury have said no more money.
Work on the first phase of the project between London and Birmingham is well underway, and that part of the line is due to open by 2033, another 10 years' time. But the project has faced delays and mounting concerns over the exact route and its potential environmental impact. The estimated cost of HS2 was between £72 billion and £98 billion at 2019 prices. Environmental activists say the construction of the high-speed rail project involves the release of millions of tonnes of CO2 into the atmosphere, as well as destroying huge tracts of ancient woodland in Buckinghamshire.
The JVS Show.
BBC Three Counties Radio.
Greg Smith is the Conservative MP for Buckingham. Hello to you, Greg.
Morning.
Morning. So do you think the government should continue with HS2 or pull the plug now?
No, absolutely not. Pull the plug. Get rid of it. Make it an project. It was always going to end in tears because it was dreamt up in the dying days of the last Labour government. For some reason, all political parties have carried on with this thing as a sort of vanity project, a shiny thing that they thought they were able to point at and say, isn't this marvellous? But there's a harsh reality that sits underneath it. We can't afford it. And it is absolutely devastating and destroying the entire line of route that it demolishes its way through, causing genuine human misery in the communities that are affected. And going back to some of the numbers that you quoted in your intro there, the really important thing was that where you said at 2019 prices. We all know what's happened to prices ever since then. And actually, we're going on a cross-party basis. Lord Berkeley, a Labour member of the House of Lords, has done some serious analysis that shows the reality is the cost of this thing is going to exceed £150 billion. We can scrap it. That will cost money. That will cost 8, 10, maybe a little bit more £billion. But what we save in that, what we don't have to commit taxpayers' cash to, could pay off a third. Let me repeat that, a third of the COVID debt, a third of the £400 billion that we borrowed for furlough and the business grants and everything through the pandemic. So the time has come that we've just got to rip the plaster off, say this was a colossal mistake, enormously wasteful, but let's not waste any more money on it and put that money to better use.
But a couple of financially related questions. Firstly, how much money has already been spent on what has happened so far with HS2? Surely, I mean, you've just talked about waste. Surely that then becomes a complete waste of money. It has achieved absolutely nothing. It's just been taxpayers' money that has literally been poured down the drain. But the other financial side to all of this that surely you will accept is that the consequences for the economy, if the project was stopped, and all those jobs, all those contracts that are relying on HS2, that would have a knock-on impact on the British economy, wouldn't it?
Well, let's take those two things into an enormous amount of taxpayers' money being wasted. Yes, I'm sorry to say it has. And it's my belief that somewhere between 12 and 15 billion pounds has already been spent. And that is, I said it was a waste of money before construction started. I maintain that it's a waste of money now. But isn't it better to accept that that was a complete waste of cash and not waste any more, not put people's money into this project going forward, but spend it on the things that I think the vast majority of my constituents actually want their taxpayer money spent on hospitals, schools, improving our existing railway network. Who knows, maybe even giving some of it back in the form of a tax cut to try and relieve the cost of living. And then the second point, would it have a knock-on effect to the economy? Well, in the very short term, yes, but the construction industry is actually crying out that HS2 is taking an enormous amount of their resource that they need to get on and grow. So in areas where HS2 are constructing the railway, you try buying concrete or building materials. HS2 has swallowed it all up, leaving small, medium-sized building firms or construction firms unable to do their work. We have a national shortage of HGV drivers, of lorry drivers, that became very apparent in the fuel crisis not so long ago. Well, those jobs are still there, and all of the thousands of people being paid top dollar to drive the dumper trucks and all of the HGVs that are destroying our local roads here in Buckinghamshire for HS2, I would say that there are clear opportunities and jobs for them to go to in other haulage firms and where their skill set can be put to good use.
What about, as some people would argue, the damage that's already been done, particularly in parts of Buckinghamshire where the work has begun? What should be done to the land that has already been developed on?
Well, I think part of the ability to reclaim some of the costs, some of the money that has been spent is going to have to be the resale of land that was taken. Now, first and foremost, land that has been taken from farmers and from businesses that exist in my constituency and others along the line of route should be as a first principle offered back to its original owners from whom it was bought, and that land that's only been taken on a temporary basis just given straight back without delay. Now, there's no getting away from the fact that a heartbreaking amount of damage has been done to our Buckinghamshire countryside. The Calvert Jubilee Nature Reserve basically destroyed ancient woodland that clearly can't be put back, having been chopped down. And I think there will need to be a very clear negotiation with government to ensure that there is nature recovery, that there is some money in the cancellation of the project to ensure that we are putting some of that countryside back. That land that has been destroyed forever as countryside, we will need to find some sort of economic use for it. But I maintain a railway is not good economic use, and the evidence I simply offer up for that is that normally when a project is proposed, when a project is created, if there is genuine demand for it, if there is actually a business case for it, if there is actually going to be people that want to use it, the private sector will fall over themselves to want a slice of the pie, to invest in it, to have a piece of that project so that when it's operational, they must then make money from this huge demand of people that are going to want to buy tickets for it and use it. The fact that not one private sector company has wanted to touch it with a bargepole with their own money, I think tells us all we need to know about the economic realities of HS2.
What are the chances of anybody in the government listening to you, though? Because, we have seen now numerous, if we just talk about the Conservative Party, numerous Conservative Prime Ministers who have all reaffirmed their commitment to HS2. And I haven't heard Rishi Sunak suggest that he has a differing view. Do you think it's likely that the government will just plough ahead with it, or is there a chance they might listen to you and other voices of dissent?
Well, first of all, never give up. It's not just me. There's actually a significant number of Conservative backbenchers and some Labour backbenchers who oppose this project as well. We do have a problem that it has had cross-party support. I was shocked when I was first elected in 2019, arriving in Parliament to make the case against HS2, both in the national taxpayer interest and in my own constituency's interest, to find that basically the government were committed to it, the Labour Party nationally were committed to it, the Lib Dems were committed to it, and it was really 50 or 60 backbench Conservative MPs that were the voice of opposition, not all of whom, I must stress, are on the line of route. The MP for the Isle of Wight, for example, is a very vocal opponent of HS2, and it obviously goes nowhere near the Isle of Wight. We've got to keep making the case, and the more the project comes up against these financial cliff edges that we warned about in the first place, where the scheme, it's already lost its eastern leg. Now it looks like Euston is at risk. We've got to keep pressing the point of what is the point of this thing? Who really prioritises getting to Birmingham or Manchester or wherever they're going a handful of minutes quicker, when actually what they want is to get on at Euston, as they already do on the West Coast Main Line, or at Marylebone on the Chiltern Main Line, and get to Birmingham or Manchester with a seat to sit on, with maybe a phone signal that works the whole length of the track, a toilet that doesn't resemble day 4 of a third-rate music festival. Those are the things that my constituents certainly want, and a third railway line to Birmingham from London just doesn't make sense.
BBC Three Counties Radio.
Penny Gaines is the chair of Stop HS2. Hello to you, Penny.
Good morning.
Morning. As much as you'd like to stop it, and I'm sure you would, there is a very good business case, is there not, for saying that so much has now been committed to it, so much sacrifice has already been made. To simply pull the plug on it now would mean that there is absolutely no tangible benefit to all that money that's been spent so far whatsoever.
Well, that's an old economic fallacy that says the money you spent, you ought to take note of the money that you've already spent. The truth is, we've spent that money. That damage has been done. It doesn't actually, it can't be undone by saying that we're going to scrap HS2. However, what you can do is say, is there going to be more expense? What's the business case like now with the money that has to be spent now? And the case just simply isn't there. When you look at the passenger numbers, and HS2 was originally all about passenger numbers, the latest government release shows that there are 2/3 of the people travelling on the West Coast Main Line compared to before the pandemic. When you look at the alternatives, people say, oh, instead of cars, but cars, HS2 wasn't being built to get people out of cars. It was being built to provide more space on the railways, except people aren't using the railways in the same way. The alternative is things like digital technologies like video conferencing and so on. And Stop HS2 has said almost from our inception that that's the real alternative to HS2. If you look back over the last 2.5, 3 years, people have got so used to using digital technologies, Zoom calls and so on, they just don't see the need to actually travel somewhere. You can say, oh yeah, but HS2 will mean that you spend less time on a train. But it's not just a bit of the journey between Birmingham and London that people look at when they're looking at travel options. They say, how long will it take me to get to the station at Birmingham? How long will it take me to get to the station at the other end? And they look at the journey as a whole. And HS2 as a whole, if you're starting off in the centre of Birmingham and you want to go to, it now looks like Old Oak Common, yeah, maybe HS2 would be beneficial. But if you're starting in a town outside Birmingham and you want to go to somewhere that isn't Euston, you'll say, well, it would take me this amount of time to get to the station, that amount of time on the train, that amount of time at the other end, or they could do a video conference and they're going to say, well, which is actually more useful for me? So the alternatives to HS2, people are seeing them as a much more practical alternative now. The cost of HS2, it has gone up by so much since it was first suggested. So when Stop HS2 started, HS2 was expected to cost $33 billion for the entire thing, including both legs to Manchester and Leeds. They've already cut out the link to Leeds, and yet the cost has gone up massively. So but meanwhile, the alternatives have become much more prevalent. So the business case is no longer there. So really, we think that HS2 ought to be scrapped in its entirety. And yes, there has been a lot of environmental damage done. But if you're not spending tens of billions on HS2, you can use some of that money to repair some of the damage that's been done, or all of the damage that's been done. And that, again, gets away from the argument that what about all the people working on HS2? There would still be work to be done, which is repairing the damage that's been done.
How much do you envisage has been spent on HS2 so far?
Oh, I haven't got those figures. It's my number. It is into the billions. But I wouldn't want to give a number on air because someone will probably come around and say she got that one wrong. So I'm not going to give a number on air. It is into the billions. Yeah.
But if you recognise it's billions of pounds of your money, my money, people listening to this programme's money that we paid in our taxes, if ultimately the government just says, yeah, well, that was all just a bit of a mistake, really, we're just going to put the brakes on that and we're not going to do it anymore, all those billions have been used for absolutely nothing positive whatsoever. If they carry on and complete it, then even though it will cost a lot of money and it will cost more than has been spent at the moment, the counter-argument is that future generations will really benefit from it. They will benefit from it. It will be in the same way that when we look at rail lines in Japan and they've got all these state-of-the-art trains and we compare them to ours and we think, gosh, look at their wonderful railway network they've got in countries like Japan. You know, we will have our own line like that. It's about being positive for the future. That's the counter-argument, Penny.
I mean, I accept there's an argument there, but then again, you have to look. They lost Japan had to rebuild its railways, and a lot of the countries where they have done high-speed rail, they were either rebuilding an entire system after sort of the devastation of war, or they had nothing to begin with. So when you look at China, the high-speed railways that they've been building are reducing journey times from, say, 15 hours on a train to 5 hours on a train, or something like that. So it's very long distance. If you look at the justification, if you look at the international railway recommendations, high-speed rail only starts beginning to be worth putting in place at a minimum distance of 150 kilometres, and that's the distance between London to Birmingham. So that is the absolute minimum distance you need.
Sure.
The kind of journeys that people do in the UK, we're not actually that large a country. When you look at the distances, they're actually quite small compared to a lot of other countries. So then you have to say, is it worth building something that will take quite some time to get up to top speed, have a very short time at top speed, and then need to brake at the other end and spend quite some time slowing down again? And it's like saying, I really, really want a Ferrari. I mean, it'd be so useful for popping down to the shops. And then you're going, well, actually, by the time I've got to the end of the road, I might be going really fast, but then I have to brake because I've got to stop.
Okay.
So the argument for high-speed rail in the UK was never there in the way.
Yeah. Totally get that. Thank you very much indeed, Penny. Penny Gaines is the chair of Stop HS2.